This is Chapter 1, Section 3, Studying Life. And this section will likely be broken up in a couple different parts, so it may just cut off at some point, and then that'll be Part 1, and then we'll just pick up at Part 2. So look for Chapter 1, Section 3, and all of its parts on YouTube as you search for it. So biology, if we look at the Greek, we break it down, and bios means life in Greek, and ology means study of. And so biology is the study of life. That's what we're looking at. And when we talk about biology, we're going to look at the scientific method to study living things. So we're using this method that we talked about last time, that process, in order to study living things. If we want to know what a living thing is, we want to know what are some of the characteristics of living things. And so the very first thing we have to do in biology is distinguish between what is a living thing, what is not. And so if we look over here, we see fire. And in ancient times, fire was considered in some cultures a living thing, something that actually sort of breathed and moved, and so it was thought of as potentially something that was actually living for a short period of time. Whereas if we're going to learn those characteristics, and we're going to know, and you know now that fire is actually not a living thing, and we'll talk about that later. Whereas like this, which is a protist called Giardia, this is a living thing. It's microscopic. If you drink unfiltered water, oftentimes you'll get this living thing in your gut, and it causes problems. Or even this ginkgo tree, which is one of my favorite trees. We'll learn that the characteristics of living things apply to this one and this one as well. And so both the ginkgo tree and Giardia are both living things. So here are characteristics of living things, and there's a list that you can sort of use in order to distinguish between living and non-living. And so if you use this list, it's sort of like a checklist. You can check whether something is a living thing or not. And so living things share either one or more of the following characteristics. They're made up of units called cells, and we're going to describe a lot of these things. You may or may not know what they are at this point, but we're going to describe them as we go forward in this course and later in this PowerPoint. Living things reproduce. They're based on a universal genetic code, DNA. They grow and develop. They obtain and use materials and energy. They respond to their environment. They maintain a stable internal environment, and they change over time. Oops. And so you can use this list in order to check whether something's a living thing or not. And so you can, let's look at a rock. And some of these questions at this point in your understanding you may or may not be able to answer, but if we thought about a rock, that doesn't look like a rock. I got to get better at using this pen. But anyways, can rocks reproduce? Well, you would say no, they can't reproduce. Do they have cells? Well, you may or may not know that. Do they have a genetic code? Do they grow and develop? So you use this list in order to check whether a rock, or if you thought of a stapler, or your clothes or something like that, you can use this list in order to find whether it's a living thing or not. So we'll go through this list and talk a little bit about the characteristics. And so all living things are made up of these basic units called cells, and we'll have a whole chapter on cells. In this picture right here, you see a variety of cells. These are all pollen grains, which are cells for flowering plants, or plants in general. And so there's a variety of them here. And their cells are very small, and it's the basic unit of living things. It's what makes up all living things, is this basic unit called cells. And we'll describe all. You'll know more than you probably want to know about cells later. Oops, sorry. Okay, characteristics of living things reproduce, and so whether it's through sexual reproduction or even asexual reproduction, living things reproduce. And so we see here all living things have little baby living things, and so baby giraffe, baby orangutan, baby rabbit, they reproduce and it can be through these two processes, sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction. Living things, they grow and develop, and so not only, you've grown and developed over time. You were smaller than you are now, but you can also think of a plant, this little seedling. It was a seed at one point in the ground, and then as you watered it and obtained sunlight, it was able to grow up and grow and develop over time. All living things are based off of this universal genetic code. So all living things have what we call DNA, and this is what DNA looks like. We're going to describe DNA to great detail in this course, but all living things have DNA, and they pass this on from one generation to another. And this genetic code stores all the information for that organism. So within this code, you will find everything, what your hair color is, your eye color, anything and everything is going to be within this genetic code. Living things need to obtain materials and use energy. So in order to continue to grow and develop and reproduce and live, living things must eat things, or if you're a plant, there's many ways of obtaining energy, but a plant would do this through sunlight. And so it just depends, but you're going to take in things, you're going to combine them, and so like you see this gecko right here is eating a cricket, and so it's going to eat this cricket, it's going to break down that material, and when it breaks down that material and uses that energy, it's called metabolism. Living things respond to their environment, and so you see here these two living things. You have a lion and a zebra. The zebra is responding to something in its environment. The zebra right here is responding to this lion, which is going to chase and try to eat it. And so living things can respond to its environment. When you think of things that are non-living, like your shoe is non-living, you can yell at your shoe, you can dance around your shoe, and your shoe's just going to stay put. It can't respond to you. Living things maintain a stable internal environment, and this is called homeostasis. Very important term that you need to know. So living things maintain a stable internal environment. So all living things have ways of doing this. If you think of yourself, if you go outside and it's really hot outside, in order to maintain that stable environment, you sweat, or your blood vessels do certain things in order to keep you cool and have a stable internal environment. So that's called homeostasis. All living things do this in different ways, and we'll talk about this throughout the course. All living things change over time, and so generation after generation, the strong survive and pass on their information to the next generation and change over time. And so right here you have a sketch of the tree of life and all the diversity of life, and they have changed in the past, and they continue to change even today. So we're going to stop right there, and we'll continue on to big ideas in biology in part 2. So remember, you need to take notes on both these parts. You should also couple this with the textbook. And so we just finished part 1. You will also put part 2 up on YouTube as well. So